The receipt for the $14,800 Christmas fund I'd wired to my daughter last month sat folded in my pocket as I watched her sneer across the Thanksgiving table. Her words, "Real family pays their way," echoed while my chest burned and my hands trembled under the tablecloth. I had already covered her in-laws' airfare, her children's gifts, and the deposit on their ski cabin. My vision blurred with rage, but I forced a thin smile, swallowing every word. 1 week later, she stood on her porch with shaking hands of her own, facing the eviction notice I'd quietly arranged. My silence repaid. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The courtroom felt colder than the weather outside. The vents hissed softly. Wood benches creaked when people shifted. I sat in the second row, hands folded, fingers pressed so tight my knuckles went pale. I kept my eyes low. Not on her, not yet. She rose before the clerk finished the case number. My daughter moved like she owned the room, chin high, hair pinned neat, mouth curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. A single sheet of paper was in her hand. The edges were crisp, like it had never seen a drawer. She held it up so the judge could see, then turned so the gallery could see too. "This house is mine now, signed by him." Her voice carried. It hit the back wall and came back. A few people whispered. Someone cleared a throat. My neck burned. On the large screen, the document appeared. My name was there. The line steadied, then dipped. It looked like my hand, and also nothing like my hand. The judge leaned forward. "Exhibit A." He motioned to the bailiff. "Bring the original." The paper crossed the room. She did not look at me. She looked past me like I was a coat on a hook. I let my breath rise and fall. I did not stand. I did not speak. I chose the only tool I trusted. Silence. Her lawyer smiled at the screen. "Your Honor, transfer of funds and rights, $312,000. This was his decision, notarized and witnessed." His words were smooth. The numbers were not. They rattled in my chest. 312,000, years inside that number, overtime inside that number, meals skipped and roofs patched, and winter coats bought in spring sales inside that number. Gasps moved through the gallery again. I felt eyes land on my shoulders like weight. I did not shrug. The judge traced a finger along the signature. The camera zoomed in. Pixels filled the screen, strokes turning to roads, ink turning to puddles. I kept still. I thought of my small metal box at home. I thought of receipts. I thought of quiet ways paper tells the truth. I let my hands tremble under the bench, hidden by the row in front. I let the tremble pass through and out. When it was gone, I folded my fingers again and waited for the next line to be spoken. "Mr. Clerk," the judge said, eyes fixed on the curve of the signature. "Note the entry." Forif, clerk nodded and typed. I looked at the seal stamped in the corner. It glittered under the fluorescent light. It wanted to look official. It wanted to look heavy. I watched it like it was a face. I did not rise. I did not shout. I held my silence like proof. The bailiff set Exhibit A on the bench. The edges tapped the wood. I watched the page settle and did not blink. Her lawyer turned, a satisfied tilt to his jaw. "Your Honor, my client has only protected what was promised. The father signed. He has a habit of handing her responsibility. This was simply formal." He said father like it was a mark. He said habit like I was a child. My daughter glanced toward my row. She let her mouth make another small smile. He always told me I would be safe. She lifted her chin at the screen. This proves it. I kept my eyes on the paper. The signature sat like a stone in water. At first you accept it as a stone. Then you notice the ripples do not match. The judge tapped the seal with a pen. "Counsel, I will hear about the notary." He looked at the coroner. "And the witness." Her lawyer nodded as if this was a game he set up. "We have both, Your Honor." He called a young man forward. Tight suit, nervous grin he tried to hide. He raised his hand for an oath. He said his name clear, like he had practiced. He said he watched me sign. He said the room smelled like lemon polish. He said the pen was blue. I watched his hands as he spoke. His thumbs rubbed his fingers in small circles. He did not look at me. When he said the word father, his eyes slid to my daughter and stayed there. The judge turned the page. Date of notarization. The clerk read it out. My stomach went still. I memorized dates for a living. Dates hold the shape of a life. That date sat in my head. On that date, I had driven home late under rain. On that date, my time card showed a double shift. On that date, I had taken a photo of a wet porch and sent it to the group chat we no longer used. Her lawyer kept talking. He often signs documents at home. He trusts his daughter. This was no different. He did not see the thing the paper could not hide. The notary stamp showed a county line 2 hours away. My county is not that county. My porch is not in that county. My time card did not clock me out in that county. The judge did not reach that line yet. He sat back and looked at the signature again. He waited to see if I would speak. "Sir," he said, voice even. "Do you wish to respond at this time?" I let the question sit in the air. It pressed down over the bench, slow and steady. My daughter turned her head in a small, sharp move. Her eyes dared me. I parted my lips. "Not yet." Her lawyer laughed under his breath. "Your Honor, there is nothing to respond to. The ink is his." The bailiff placed a plastic sleeve on the rail. The paper inside shone. My fingers twitched, then stilled. In my coat pocket, a thin manila envelope bent slightly when I moved. I had packed it this morning. I had not opened it since last spring. I kept it closed. The judge drew a short breath and lifted Exhibit A again. My eyes stayed on the seal as the pen touched it, one gentle tap that made the foil shimmer. My daughter shifted her weight and faced the room. She carried the calm of someone who thinks there will be no questions. She carried the tone of a person who expects people to thank her for taking what she wanted. "Your Honor," she said, soft and sweet, "my father forgets details. He always has. I manage things, bills, appointments, transfers. He leans on me." She rolled the last words on her tongue like candy. The gallery nodded in little waves. People like simple stories. People like daughters who help. I can forget where I put my reading glasses. I do not forget where I put a lifetime. Her lawyer stepped closer to the screen. "Note the pressure on the P and the N, identical to his signed lease from last year." He pointed with a capped pen. The camera obeyed. Pixels moved. The strokes looked right until you stared too long. Letters are like faces. The shape is not the truth. The pressure is the truth. The beginning and the exit are the truth. The judge motioned to the clerk. "Pull the lease." The clerk scrolled. Another document filled the screen. My real signature stretched across the bottom. The gallery leaned forward like they could feel the ink. My daughter remained still. Her hands were light on the edge of counsel's table. Her ring caught the fluorescent light and flashed. "Your Honor," her lawyer said, "the father signs with a high entry, a steady base, a downward exit, exactly the same on Exhibit A." He smiled at his own explanation. He did not see the small thing the camera could not hide. The high entry on my real signature lives inside the loop. The high entry on Exhibit A floated above the loop like it was afraid to touch the line. The judge raised his eyebrows. He looked at me again. "Sir, do you have counsel present today?" I let my voice stay calm. I do. Will counsel be speaking now? I pressed my palms together. Not yet. A small laugh broke in the gallery. My daughter did not laugh. Her mouth pressed thin and flat. She turned to face me at last. Her voice dropped. You are making this hard on yourself. I met her eyes for a breath. I did not blink. Am I? She leaned closer to her lawyer and said it louder. For the room. He cannot function without me. The sound reached the back wall and came back again. People looked at me the way people look at a chair with a broken leg. The judge set Exhibit A aside and reached for a second page. The notary seal showed again. The circle was clean. The county line was clear. He read the date. He read the city. His pen paused above the ring of ink. The clerk placed a heavy notary ledger on the evidence cart. The metal wheels squeaked. The seal on the cover caught the light. I fixed my eyes on that circle and did not move. The judge raised his gaze. His eyes were calm and flat. We will mark this for further review. He glanced at the clock. We have time for brief statements. Her lawyer was already halfway there. Your Honor, this is simple. A father gave his daughter what he promised. He confirmed it in writing. The account is not in dispute. The signature is his. The notary is proper. He said proper like a door was already locked behind me. My daughter turned her shoulder toward the gallery. Her profile looked like a picture in a frame. I only did what he wanted. He always said he would make sure I was secure. He always said, "You will not worry about money." She looked at me again. There was pity in the look, the kind people use when they want a witness to see their kindness. I am only following his wishes. I kept my mouth closed. I let her build the story. I let her stack it on a table with thin legs. A low hum from the vents filled the next few seconds. The clerk flipped the notary ledger open and slid it toward the bench. The judge studied the entry lines. His pen hovered. His eyes moved left to right. He closed the book with a soft thud. We will reconvene, he said. Bring your full evidence at the next hearing. Her lawyer nodded. We will, Your Honor. The bailiff called the next case. People stood and filed out. The room lost its heat as soon as bodies moved. My daughter walked past my row without a glance. Her perfume drifted after her. It smelled like clean sugar. At the door, I paused and looked back at the screen, now gone black. A faint reflection held the outline of a man in a plain jacket, hands still, shoulders square. The outline did not look weak. It looked quiet. Outside, the hall was a long strip of polished floor and framed photos of retired judges. I stood at a window and watched the street. Cars flowed in steady lines. Nobody looked up. Nobody cared that a single sheet of paper had tried to rearrange a life. I left the building and walked to the bus stop. I kept my hands inside my coat to feel the thin manila envelope. The edge of a clipped stack pressed my palm. I held it like it might fly away. At home, I set my keys in the bowl by the door. The apartment was clean and simple. A small table, 2 chairs, a light that worked best in the evenings. I placed the court copy in the center of the table and stood for a moment, looking down at it. On the counter sat a small steel box with a simple lock. The key waited under a magnet on the side of the fridge. I took the key down and held it between finger and thumb. I did not open the box. Not yet. The mail lay in a neat pile near the sink. White envelopes, 2 brown ones, a long windowed letter from the bank. I pulled the chair out and sat. I slid the court copy to the side and squared the stack of mail with the edge of the table. For a long minute, I only listened to the silence. It felt strong. It felt like a tool, not a weakness. My gosh, phone buzzed once on the counter. I did not move to check it. I kept my eyes on the envelopes. The top one showed a return address I knew by heart. The second one did too. I reached for a letter opener and stopped with the tip resting on the first seal. The paper did not give way. The blade had not pushed through. I let the weight of the handle rest in my hand. The court had given me time. The next move would not be noise. It would be paper. I turned the first envelope over in my palm, the seal still unbroken, the flap catching the kitchen light as I lowered it towards the table. I lowered the first envelope to the table and slid the letter opener under the flap. The paper gave with a clean whisper. A bank logo stared up at me in heavy blue ink. I unfolded the pages and read each line slowly. The numbers sat there like stones at the bottom of a clear river. You cannot deny what you can see. Change of beneficiary. Transfer confirmed. Account ending in 7-3. My mouth went dry. The date on the letter matched the one on Exhibit A. The timestamp read 11:42 a.m. On that morning I had been at my station, logged in, hair still wet from the rain I walked through to catch the early bus. I had a photo of my punch card. I had sent it to a friend to prove I would be late for lunch. I turned the page and found a second notice. Signature card update. There was a small photo of a form, grainy and crooked, like someone had rushed the scan. My name sat on the line, thick and dark, as if the pen had pressed too hard. A note in the margin read, "Notary present." I looked toward the small steel box on the counter. It had waited there for years, holding my habit of keeping proof. People laughed at that habit. They said I kept too many copies. They said I did not trust anyone. I told them I trusted paper. Paper does not panic. Paper does not forget. I brought the box to the table and set it beside the bank letter. The key felt cool between my fingers. I did not turn it yet. I kept my eyes on the second envelope and opened it too. More notices. A courtesy alert. A successful verification. A cheery line at the end that said, "Thank you for choosing us." My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number showed on the screen. "Please stop making this messy. You know you gave it to her." I stared at the words until they blurred. I did not reply. I put the phone face down and let the room be quiet again. The silence helped me think in straight lines. I slid the key into the lock and paused. I listened to the clock above the sink. One slow tick, another. I turned the key. The lid lifted a few inches, the hinge catching, my fingers still on the edge as the steel box waited open on the table. Inside the steel box, everything was neat. Folders stacked, tabs marked in black pen, each section holding years of my life broken down into numbers, seals, and dates. I had built this archive slowly, almost compulsively, while others teased me for never throwing anything away. The top folder carried the title SAVINGS. I opened it and pulled out the original beneficiary forms, the ones I had signed myself years ago when the account was first opened. My handwriting was clean, steady, almost calm. A notary's seal from my county sat clear in the corner. The difference was sharp, even to the untrained eye. Exhibit A looked heavy-handed, rushed, almost too perfect. This one was simply me. I laid both forms side by side on the table. The forgery suddenly looked like a child's imitation. My chest tightened. They thought I would never notice. They thought I would never compare. I flipped further through the folder. Monthly statements, each one filed, each showing the slow growth of the account. Deposits from years of work shifts, tax refunds, and side jobs. The numbers had built like bricks in a wall, solid and patient. Then the line dropped. The last few statements showed heavy withdrawals, bleeding across the page in red. A sound escaped me, low and rough, not quite a word. I traced one withdrawal with my finger. $35,000. Another. $68,000. Dates circled close together, as if someone had grown bold. The knock on the door startled me. 3 short raps, sharp and impatient. I froze, my hand hovering over the papers. The knock came again. I gathered the forms quickly, slid them back into the folder, and closed the steel box. The key turned with a soft click. At the door stood my daughter. Her smile was faint, but her eyes carried the same cold shine as the courtroom. "Dad," she said lightly, like we were neighbors meeting in a hallway. "I wanted to check on you. You looked overwhelmed today." I said nothing. I stepped aside just enough for her to enter. She walked to the table and let her gaze fall on the unopened mail. Her hand hovered above it, not touching but claiming. "You shouldn't stress about these things," she said, her voice calm. "That's why I handle them. You've always been careless with papers." Her words sliced. I thought of every late night, every careful note, every receipt kept safe. Careless was not what I was. Careless was what she wanted me to be. I pulled the chair out and sat. She remained standing, the light from the window cutting across her face. "You signed the transfer," she continued. "You might not remember, but you did. And if you fight it, you'll only embarrass yourself. Do you want that?" Her tone sharpened on the last line. It was not a question. It was a warning. I folded my hands on the table, knuckles tight. I did not argue. I let the silence settle. Her smirk flickered. She hated silence. She thrived on noise, on reaction. She leaned closer. "Dad, you always promised to take care of me. This is you keeping that promise. Don't ruin it now." Her voice lingered in the air, cold and heavy. I looked at the envelope still resting under my hand, the bank's logo peeking from the corner, my thumb pressing against the seal as if holding something back. I pressed my thumb harder into the envelope, the paper bending under the weight. My daughter's eyes followed the motion, sharp as a blade. She tilted her head slightly, her smirk pulling back into place. "You really don't want to open that," she said softly. "It'll only confuse you more. Numbers, codes, legal terms. You never liked those details." I breathed in through my nose, slow and steady. She was trying to rewrite me in front of my own table. For years, she had painted me as distracted, forgetful, weak with paperwork. Yet the steel box behind me whispered the truth of who I was. Meticulous, patient, unwilling to throw away even the smallest receipt. I slid the letter opener across the table, its point glinting in the light. I did not pick it up. I only let it rest there, in reach. She crossed her arms. "If you drag this into court again, they'll laugh at you. Do you understand? You'll look like a bitter old man trying to take back what you already gave. People will believe me." Her words pressed down heavier than the air in the courtroom. For a second, heat rose into my throat. My tongue wanted to move, but I forced it still. My silence was heavier than her threat. Her smirk faltered for just a blink, but she covered it quickly. She walked towards the window, pulling the curtain aside. "You've always said family matters more than money. Well, now it's time to prove it. Let this go, Dad." I stared at her reflection in the glass. Her eyes sparkled, but not from kindness, from triumph. The seconds stretched. The clock ticked once, twice. I reached for the envelope at last, slid my finger beneath the flap, and opened it without a word. Her reflection stiffened. The letter unfolded across the table. Another notice. "Funds transferred, $62,000. Beneficiary, account 8,437. Name, her full name." Her breath caught, just barely. Then she laughed, a quick, brittle sound. "See? That's proof. You set this up. You agreed." I ran my eyes down the page. A date again. A time again. Both falling on days I was clocked in at work, my punch card marked with black ink. I thought of the digital copies I kept, each timestamp locked, impossible to erase. I folded the letter neatly and placed it on the stack with the first. My daughter shifted back toward the door, her tone sharpening once more. "Don't embarrass yourself, Dad. If you push this, you'll lose more than money. You'll lose me." Her hand gripped the doorknob. She waited, wanting a reply, a plea, even anger. I gave her nothing. The door clicked shut behind her. The room was quiet again, only the papers left breathing on the table, their corners lifting slightly in the draft from the vent. The silence after she left was heavier than her threats. I sat at the table, the stack of letters in front of me like a quiet jury. Each line of ink, each date, each stamp carried more weight than her words ever could. I reached for the steel box again, set it on the table, and opened it fully this time. Inside, rows of folders waited. Savings, tax, property, loans. Every year, every copy, every receipt. People had laughed at me for keeping too much. Tonight, the papers did not feel like clutter. They felt like armor. I pulled the most recent tax folder, laid it open, and compared the reported balances against the sudden drops in my savings account. The numbers spoke in a steady rhythm. They told me when the bleeding had begun. They told me how fast it spread. They told me the hand behind it was greedy, not careful. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "Stop digging. It's done. Don't ruin what's left." I didn't reply. I slid the phone under a stack of statements until its glow disappeared. I let the silence rise again, wrapping around me like a shield. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and drew one breath. The hurt was sharp, but the pattern was clear. Forged signatures, withdrawals masked as transfers, notaries out of county, witnesses rehearsed. The story was not complicated. It was calculated. I opened my eyes and stared at the papers. For the first time since the courtroom, my hands stopped trembling. This was no accident. It was a design, and designs leave trails. I pressed my palm flat against the envelope on top of the stack, the ink still warm from my touch, and knew the next step would not be noise. It would be evidence. I began early the next morning. The sun had barely reached the blinds when I carried the steel box to the table again. Coffee cooled untouched beside me as I spread the folders out in rows, each one marked in my own careful handwriting. The bank statements were first. Line by line, I highlighted the withdrawals. I circled the dates, wrote them in the margins, and cross-checked them against my work records. My time cards lived in a separate folder, each one scanned, printed, and signed by supervisors. On every date money vanished, I was on the clock. Some nights I had worked late into the dark, machines humming around me, the supervisor's initials clear on the sheet. The pattern grew sharper with each page. She had chosen moments when she knew I would be busy, when my absence gave her cover. It was arrogant, but arrogance leaves trails. I stacked the documents in a new pile. "Unauthorized withdrawals," I wrote on the tab. Next came the notarized forms. I studied the seals, tracing the ridges with my fingertip. 2 counties over. Wrong office. Wrong notary ID. Whoever had stamped them assumed I would never know the difference. But I did. I took photos with my phone, one after another, each page captured, each detail preserved. The camera clicked like a metronome. The silence grew thick, but it felt steady now. Not heavy like before. More like focus. My phone buzzed again. A new message. "You're wasting your time. Nobody will believe you." I did not answer. I placed the phone, face down, and wrote in my notebook instead. "Belief is noise. Paper is proof." I turned to the next folder, Receipts from 5 years back spilled across the table, small slips of paper with faded ink, each one carrying its own truth waiting to be lined up in order. The 5-year stack was a map. I lined the slips by month and pinned them to dates in my notebook. Grocery runs, utility payments, pharmacy pickups. On the same days the account lost large sums, my receipts showed me somewhere else, living an ordinary life. Ordinary is a strong alibi when it is written down. I called the bank from the kitchen, the receiver warm against my ear. I kept my voice calm. I asked for device logs and branch visit records linked to my account during the flagged dates. The woman on the line was polite at first, then careful. She read a script. She said a supervisor would call me back. She asked me to confirm my mailing address. An email is faster, I said. PDF copies, full headers. A pause. We can send a summary. I want the logs. Another pause. I will escalate. I wrote the time of the call in my notebook. I noted her name and extension. When I hung up, I took photos of the notes and sent them to my own email. Every stroke created a trail. Next, the notary. I searched the county database and entered the ID from Exhibit A. The number returned a page with a red banner. Commission ended last year. My finger stilled on the trackpad. I captured the screen and printed it, then stamped the printout with the date using my small office stamper. I called the notary office listed on the seal. A clerk picked up, brisk and bright. I read the ID to her and asked for the ledger entry for the date shown on Exhibit A. Paper rustled on her end. Keys tapped. That date does not have an entry with that name, she said. Also, the notary with that ID moved out of state 8 months ago. Are you sure? Yes, I am looking at the retirement paperwork. Can you send a letter on letterhead confirming both facts? Silence, then a short reply. Yes. I thanked her. We confirmed my email. I wrote the time, her name, and the request in my book, then photographed the page again. I turned back to the table. The map grew clearer. Red arrows for withdrawals, blue circles for my time cards, green triangles for camera sources I might request later, bank branch, corner store, my building's lobby. None of this felt dramatic. It felt honest. My phone chimed. An email had arrived. Subject, Notary Commission Verification. I opened the PDF. The letter was short and exact. The commission number on Exhibit A was inactive on the date shown. There was no ledger entry for my name that day. I printed 2 copies. One went into a new folder marked Notary Contradictions. The other went flat on the table to remind me what the truth looks like when it sits still. The printer hummed again as I cued the county search receipt. The warm paper sliding into my hand while the steel box lid rested open beside the growing stacks. By noon, the table had become a grid. Columns for source, rows for date. A simple key in the corner, W for withdrawals, T for time cards, N for notary, C for camera. I steadied the edges with binder clips so nothing would slide. I opened my photo archive and searched by date. Images from those mornings appeared. A rain-dark street. My clocked-in screen at work. A sandwich on a napkin with a timestamp. Little moments I never thought would matter. Now they were anchors. I called my building manager and asked about lobby footage retention. He sighed. We overwrite every 20 days. I checked the calendar. Too late for some dates, not all. Please pull the window from the week of the largest withdrawal, I said. I can send you a still if you have the time bands. I do. I emailed him the exact windows tied to the bank timestamps. Minutes, not hours. He replied with 2 stills. I opened the first image. The lobby clock showed 11:37 a.m. A figure in a hooded coat faced the camera for a second. The posture looked wrong for me. The shoes were not mine. The height was off by an inch. I marked it as possible. The second image showed the lobby at 11:58 a.m. The same day. I was at work then. The still captured the elevator closing. The face was not visible. I filed the images in a folder on my desktop and printed them with timestamps below. The bank called back. A supervisor this time. Clean voice, careful tone. "We can provide limited device history," she said. "A new device registered on 2 transfer dates." "Can you confirm the device details?" "Only the last characters, 8B, 2C. "Time of registration?" 11:39 a.m. and 11:14 a.m., local. I wrote each detail down. "Was a 2-factor code sent?" "Yes." "To which number?" She did not answer. She offered to email a formal response. I thanked her and confirmed the reference number for the call. I sat back and let the information settle. New device, midday, 2-factor code. I looked at my own phone. My number had not buzzed at those times. I scrolled back through that week. No codes, no alerts. I opened my carrier account and pulled the message logs for those dates. Nothing. I turned to my old phone, the one tucked in a drawer by the bookshelf. I charged it and waited as the screen woke slowly. Old messages rose like dust in sunlight. In that same week, a text thread with my daughter flashed. Her line read, "Are you at work all day?" I had replied, "Yes." "Why?" Her answer was casual. "Just asking." I screenshotted the thread and printed it. Short words, large meaning. In the afternoon, I called a handwriting examiner. The office was quiet on the other end, paper sounds and a soft radio somewhere. I explained what I had, and I asked how to proceed. "Bring me originals when possible," she said. "High-resolution scans if not. I will mark hesitations. Line, quality, speed, pen lifts. If the pressure pattern breaks, we will see it." She paused. "Do not send photos to the other side yet. Let them show their copies first." Understood. She booked me for the next day. I wrote the appointment on a sticky note and placed it on the lid of the steel box. I liked seeing it there. It felt like a hand on the plan saying, "Keep going." Near evening, the bank email arrived. Subject: Device registration and transaction summary. The PDF included 2 tables. On each disputed date, a new device ID appeared minutes before the transfer. The IP block was a different provider than mine. The summary used careful words, but the shape was clear. I printed 3 sets, one for me, one for the examiner, one for a lawyer I had not called yet. I stood and clipped the new pages into the grid, the binder clips snapping shut while the room fell into the calm that only ordered paper can make. Night settled outside the window. Streetlights came on. The table glowed under the kitchen lamp, a small island of white squares, black ink, and steady lines. I opened a fresh binder and filled it with tabbed sections. Timeline, bank, notary, device logs, messages, images, work records. I put a clean cover sheet in front and wrote one word at the top: facts. I slipped the forged exhibit photocopy into a clear sleeve. Next to it, I placed my original signature samples from old documents, the ones that lived in the property folder. Lease, insurance form, tax sign-off. The differences did not shout. They sat still and let the eye discover them. Judges respect that. Juries do too. My phone buzzed on the counter. A new message from a number I knew by heart. "Last chance to keep this private." Another followed. "Say you forgot. Sign one more form. We can fix everything." I read both lines twice and then saved the screen to my drive. I did not answer. I opened my email to a draft I had started earlier. Subject: Consultation request. I attached a short list. What I could prove, what I suspected, what I needed. I addressed it to a law firm a neighbor had whispered to me about when we crossed in the hall last month. He had said they were quiet and good with numbers. Quiet was what I wanted. Numbers were all I had. I hovered over send, then stopped. I leaned back and looked at the table again. The map was tight. The holes were small. I noted 2 more items for the morning. ATM camera request for the branch streets away, employment letter from my supervisor verifying the hours on the contested dates. A car door thudded in the street below. Footsteps came up the building stairs, quick and hard. They stopped outside my door. The handle turned once, not a knock, a test, then a sharp rap 3 times, the same rhythm as before. I slid the binder closed and set it near the edge of the table. I pressed my palm flat on the cover to steady it. The room held its breath. The knock came again, louder now. A voice through the wood, too bright, too smooth. "Open up. We should talk, Dad." I did not move yet. I let the silence answer first. I let it stretch long enough to feel like a wall. Then I stood, reached for the chain, and lifted it slowly from its catch. The chain hung loose in my hand, the door still closed, the binder waiting on the table behind me as the voice on the other side shifted from sweet to sharp. The voice outside the door grew sharper. "Dad, don't make this worse, just open up." I stayed still, the chain dangling in my hand, the wood between us carrying her tone into the room. Behind her voice came another, lower and smug, her fiancé. "Let him sweat," he muttered. "He'll fold. He always does." I tightened my grip on the chain but kept the door closed. My silence pressed back against them. Another knock, harder this time. "If you have something to say it now," she demanded. "Otherwise, I'll assume you're admitting everything." Her words struck like stones, but stones fall silent when they hit the ground. I let them fall. Finally, I set the chain back, opened the door a crack, and looked at them. Her smile was thin. Her fiancé's arms crossed in satisfaction. She stepped forward as if to enter. I blocked the way with one hand on the frame. "Why are you digging through old papers?" she asked, her tone sweet with an edge. "Don't you see how pathetic that looks? No judge is going to believe a pile of receipts over a signed document." Her fiancé leaned closer, his voice low enough for me, but loud enough to sting. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're just an old man clinging to scraps." I said nothing. I let the silence answer. My eyes stayed on hers. The silence unsettled her more than any words could. She shifted her weight, forcing another smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've always told me family is everything," she pressed. "So prove it. Drop this. Don't drag me through court. I'll forgive your confusion." Her fiancé laughed under his breath. "Confusion? That's generous." My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed calm when I finally spoke. "Leave." Her smile broke for half a second. She had wanted me to argue, to raise my voice, to slip. But silence was steadier than noise. She glanced past me at the binder on the table, its spine marked facts, then looked back with narrowed eyes. Her gaze lingered on the binder, and her lips curled. "So that's what you've been doing," she said softly. "Pretending you're some detective. Do you really think your messy folders mean anything? Courts want signatures, Dad. Judges want proof. And you gave it to me." Her fiancé stepped in closer, his cologne thick in the hallway. He lowered his voice as if offering advice, but each word was sharpened. "Listen, old man, drop this now and maybe you'll still get visits on holidays. Push it, and you'll be alone. She won't even pick up your calls. You'll die with a binder full of junk, mail." The words stung, but I held my breath steady. Their cruelty no longer surprised me. They had rehearsed these lines, polished them like weapons. I let the door creak wider, just enough for the light inside to fall across their faces. Then I said, calm and flat, "Family who steals is not family." Her smirk vanished for a beat. His jaw tightened. But neither of them could afford silence, so they filled it. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "If you try to drag me into court, I'll stand there and tell everyone you're losing your mind. You think they'll believe you over me? I'm younger, smarter, better prepared." Her fiancé added, "And when the judge laughs at you, remember this moment. We warned you." I let their threats echo. My eyes never left hers. She blinked first. Without another word, I closed the door. The latch clicked. The chain slipped back into place. Their muffled voices carried down the hall as they left. "He's too stubborn. We'll crush him in court." I turned away from the door and set the binder in the center of the table again. The room returned to silence, thick but steady. The last echo of their footsteps faded, leaving only the sound of the clock above the sink, each tick pushing me closer to what had to come next. I sat back at the table, the binder open again beneath the kitchen lamp. Their words still floated in the air, ugly and sharp, but they no longer cut the way they once did. Instead, they hardened into fuel. I flipped to the notary contradictions section. The letter from the county clerk lay in its sleeve, the red banner highlighted across the top. My daughter's threat echoed in my mind. "I'll tell everyone you're losing your mind." But the banner said otherwise. The banner said, "Fraud." I imagined the courtroom again, her standing tall, waving Exhibit A like a flag, expecting everyone to nod along. This time I pictured laying my page flat across the table, the seal of the county clerk staring back at her. No raised voice, no argument, just proof. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the counter until it rattled. I didn't move. When it stopped, I picked it up and glanced at the message. "You'll ruin yourself if you keep going. No one will stand with you." The words were hers, short, cruel, certain. I slid the phone aside, powered it off, and stacked it under the steel box lid. Out of sight, out of reach. I returned to the binder. My hand traced the cover where I had written FACTS. The word steadied me. I didn't need her permission to seek the truth. I didn't need her voice to confirm my worth. The papers would speak louder than either of us. I pulled a blank sheet from the back and began a new timeline. Date, transaction, proof, contradiction. Each line filled slowly, the pen steady in my grip. The map grew, and with it, my silence grew stronger. By the time the clock struck midnight, the table was no longer just a workspace. It was a battlefield, and every page was a soldier lined up for the fight that was coming. The night pressed on, heavy and quiet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the rows of documents fanned across the table like cards in a fixed game. Their threats still echoed, but my silence had dulled the sting. What mattered now wasn't noise, it was order. I reached for the folder marked Messages and slipped the printed screenshots inside. Her words, his words, every veiled threat, captured, dated, preserved. The binder swallowed them without emotion. Proof never argued. It only waited. For a moment, I thought of the years before this. Birthdays when I stayed late at work to afford her gifts. Bills I paid quietly while she boasted about independence. I had called it love, called it duty. Now I saw the pattern more clearly. Dependence dressed as entitlement. Gratitude erased by greed. The lamp flickered once, buzzing faintly, then steadied. I looked around my small apartment. Walls bare, shelves simple, no excess. Everything I owned was honest, paid for, clean. Everything she now flaunted in her new life had been built on my back, stolen through ink and arrogance. I closed the binder, its weight solid beneath my palm. Tomorrow I would place it on another desk, a lawyer's desk, and watch the pages speak where my voice would not. I stood, slid the steel box back beneath the counter, and turned off the lamp. The papers remained, waiting in silence. When I lay down that night, her last threat replayed. "You'll regret this." I closed my eyes and let the words fade into nothing. Regret belonged to her now, not me. Morning light crept through the blinds, thin and pale. I woke with the binder still on my desk, its spine facing the chair like it was waiting for me. I didn't hesitate. I showered, dressed, and tucked it under my arm. The law firm sat 2 blocks from the courthouse, a plain brick building with narrow windows. The receptionist barely looked up as I signed my name. When I handed over the binder, her eyes flicked to the word "Facts" written in bold on the cover. She asked me to wait. Minutes later, a man in a dark suit stepped out, his tie loose at the collar. "You're the one with the documents?" "Yes." We entered a quiet office. I placed the binder on his desk and slid it across. He opened the cover, flipped a few pages, and let out a low sound. "Most clients bring excuses," he said. "You brought receipts." He pulled a legal pad closer. "Walk me through it." I explained each section: withdrawals, time cards, notary contradictions, device logs. His pen moved fast, scratching down details. Every so often he looked up, eyes sharper each time. "You've been careful," he said. "Meticulous." "I've been quiet," I corrected. He smiled faintly. "That's rarer than you think." He flipped to the notary letter, read it twice, then tapped it with his pen. "This alone raises doubt. But combined with the device logs and your employment records, this isn't just doubt. This is fraud." He closed the binder gently, as though sealing a verdict. "With these receipts, you don't just win, you bury them." The words steadied something in me. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest eased. He leaned back, pen resting between his fingers, his next words deliberate. "Now we prepare." He opened a legal folder and began a checklist. Step 1, preservation notices. We tell the bank to hold every log, camera clip, and keystroke tied to those transfers. Step 2, a motion for a temporary freeze on any funds moved after the alleged signature date. Step 3, subpoena the notary ledger and commission records. Step 4, handwriting analysis on the originals. He looked up. "Can you bring originals?" "Yes, I kept everything." "Good. Courts like originals. Banks respect them." He drafted the first notice while I watched. The language was simple and hard. Preserve, produce, authenticate. It read like a hammer, not a story. He slid a copy to me. "Sign receipt of our engagement. This allows me to speak for you." The pen felt heavier than it should. I signed and dated. He countersigned and stamped the page. The sound of the stamp hitting paper gave me a strange relief. Proof had a sound. "We will also file an affidavit," he said. "Short, clean, only what you can swear to. No opinions, dates, times, attach exhibits. Judges like clarity." He turned to the notary contradictions section and clipped the county letter to a draft motion. "This is strong. The inactive commission speaks by itself. The missing ledger entry speaks by itself. Your employment records lock the timeline." He sketched a simple map on his pad. "Here is the shape of our case. A. The signature is not yours. B. The notarization is invalid. C. The transactions were executed while you were at work. D. A new device registered minutes before each transfer. E. Two-factor did not hit your number." He underlined the last point. "We will compel the bank to identify the destination of the code. If the code did not go to your number, someone redirected it. That is intent." I nodded. The room felt steady. There was nothing theatrical here. Only steps. He called his paralegal in. She wore a gray sweater and carried a calm I trusted. He summarized the plan, then handed her my binder. "Scan at high resolution," he said. "Color, do not compress. Log chain of custody." She nodded and left with the binder like it was a fragile instrument. The lawyer faced me again. "2 more items. Your supervisor's letter for the disputed dates, and the building footage. Ask for an affidavit from the manager that the clips came from your lobby system, with the device model and retention policy listed." "I will bring both." He leaned forward. "There is one more thing. Do not confront them. No calls, no messages. Let their words come to us. Arrogant people often write their own endings." I thought of the texts on my counter last night. I thought of the threats through my door. I nodded once. "I will stay silent." "Good," he said. "Silence is discipline. Paper is voice." He stood and reached for a business card. "Before you go, stop by our examiner. Her office is 2 floors down. She will take custody of your original signatures and compare line quality with the alleged transfer. If she sees pen lifts or tremor where your hand is usually smooth, we document it." He paused, then added a line that landed like a promise. "When ink lies, it lies in slow motion. We can see it." I left his office with a folder of fresh forms and a list that fit in one pocket. The hallway outside felt brighter than when I came in. I took the stairs down to the examiner, counting each step, letting the rhythm clear my head. In the examiner's room, the lights were warm and even. She wore simple glasses and spoke in short sentences. I laid out my originals: lease, tax forms, insurance, old letters to the bank where my signature repeated across years. She set a camera arm over the table and took images at high resolution. "Your natural entry is inside the loop," she said, pointing to a frame on her screen. "Your exit is fast, with a taper." She brought up the scan of Exhibit A. "Here the entry floats. The exit is heavy." "Heavy means what?" "Hesitation. The hand does not trust the line. The writer is drawing, not writing." She took pressure readings with a device I did not recognize. She logged each image and placed my originals in a sealed sleeve with my name, date, and time. "Chain of custody begins now," she said. "Do not break this seal until court or deposition." When I stepped back into the corridor, my phone vibrated. An email from the bank supervisor arrived. Subject: device history and 2-factor summary. The body listed 2 registration events tied to transfers, with partial device identifiers and times. At the bottom, one careful line made my chest go still. Verification codes were sent to a secondary number ending in 49. My number did not end in 49. I walked toward the stairs and stopped at the landing. I read the line again. Secondary number. Ending in 49. Someone had added a number or switched one. Either way, the code had gone to a place I did not control. I forwarded the email to the lawyer and to myself. Then I took a screenshot and saved it twice. I stood on the landing until my breath matched the calm of the building. No anger, only steps. On my way out, the paralegal passed me in the hall with a small smile. "Your scans are secure," she said. "We built a folder for the judge. Tabs and covers. Clean." "Thank you," she nodded. "Clean wins." Outside, the air felt lighter. The city moved around me, drivers impatient, crosswalks blinking. I did not rush. I carried my empty binder under my arm like a promise I would soon refill. At the corner, I paused, pulled out my small list, and wrote one new line in neat letters: "Carrier records for number ending in 49. Then I folded the list and began the walk to my supervisor's office, each step measured, each step part of the same plan. My supervisor's office sat at the far end of the plant, walls lined with safety charts and calendars that never seemed to keep up with the month. He looked up when I knocked, his brow furrowing. "You're here early," he said. "Everything all right?" I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and laid the request form on his desk. "I need a verification letter. Dates, hours worked, signatures, official letterhead, for court." He leaned back, arms crossing. "Court? This about that mess I heard whispers of?" I nodded once. "They're saying I transferred money on days I was right here. I need you to confirm I was clocked in." He rubbed his jaw, then reached for his computer. "You've never missed a shift. If you say you were here, you were here." His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. The printer hummed to life, spitting out the first page. He signed at the bottom, then stamped it with the plant's seal. "There, official. If anyone questions it, I'll swear myself. You've given this place more hours than anyone." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my folder. "Thank you." He shook his head. "Family turning on family. Ugly business, but paper doesn't lie." The words sat with me as I walked out. Next stop was the building manager. His office was small, filled with keys hanging from hooks like dull silver teeth. He looked up from his logbook. "You again," he said. "Hear about those stills?" "Yes. I need an affidavit, confirming those images came from the lobby system. Date pulled, device model, retention policy." He sighed, scratching his head. "You know, most tenants don't even ask where the cameras are pointed." "I notice things," I said quietly. He pulled a sheet from his typewriter, typed steadily, then signed it. "Here. Official enough for a judge. Keep it dry." I thanked him, slid the affidavit into my folder beside my supervisor's letter, and left. By the time I reached home, the folder had grown heavier, not from paper alone, but from direction. Each page tightened the net. On my table, the binder waited. I added the new documents, clipped them into their sections, and wrote a fresh note. "Carrier subpoena for number ending in 49. I stared at that line for a long time. Whoever had added that number thought they were clever. They had forgotten one thing. Carriers keep logs. Logs are harder to erase than trust. The lamp hummed above me as I closed the binder again. For the first time, the silence in the apartment didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like control. The phone buzzed once on the counter, a new message arriving. I did not rush to it. I let it wait, the glow fading, while the binder sat steady under my palm like a shield. When I finally checked the phone, the message was short. "You're wasting your time. By the time you get to court, it'll all be gone." No name, no signature, just the same tone I knew too well. I took a screenshot, saved it to the messages folder, and powered the phone off again. Every threat they sent only stacked higher in my favor. That night I set up my small scanner, the one I had bought years ago for taxes. Page by page, I digitized the binder, naming each file by date and subject. Facts 01 withdrawal, Facts 02 notary, Facts 3 device. The folders filled until the drive light blinked steady green. I created 2 encrypted copies, one on a flash drive, one in cloud storage. I labeled the drives with a single word: truth. The clock crept past midnight. My eyes burned, but my hands stayed steady. I pulled out a yellow pad and wrote tomorrow's tasks in clean block letters. Carrier subpoena for number ending in 49. Confirm examiner's preliminary report. Deliver affidavit copies to lawyer. Research bank's branch camera request form. I underlined each one, then tore the page free and clipped it to the binder's inside cover. I stood, stretched, and walked to the window. Across the street, lights in other apartments blinked out, one by one. The city settled into sleep. I looked down at my small table, the binder waiting, the flash drives beside it. For weeks I had felt cornered, humiliated, silenced. Now the silence belonged to me. It was no longer weakness, it was a weapon. I turned off the lamp, the room falling into shadow. The binder gleamed faintly under the last light from the window. When I lay in bed, I thought of the courtroom ahead. Not of shouting or defending myself, but of placing these pages down one by one until the truth built its own voice. And for the first time, I slept without waking in the night. By the end of the week, whispers had started. Not from me. I had said nothing. But arrogance never stays hidden long. My daughter's new car drew eyes. The leather seats, the way she parked right at the curb with music pulsing through the windows. Neighbors who once waved politely now frowned as she passed. At the grocery store, I overheard two clerks at the register. "Did you hear? She paid for that party with cash. Thick envelope like in the movies. Where'd she get that kind of money? Her father, I think, but not the way you think." They laughed nervously, lowering their voices when they saw me a few aisles over. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend her. I only placed my items on the belt and let their words follow me out into the parking lot. The lawyer had told me, "Do not confront. Let the optics shift on their own." And they did. At church that Sunday, I sat in the back row. My daughter and her fiancé swept in late, dressed sharp, eyes forward. People noticed the ring on her hand, bigger than anything she had before. People noticed the designer label on her coat. They also noticed the way she avoided me, how her smile didn't reach the pew where I sat alone. After service, an older neighbor approached me quietly. She lowered her voice. "I don't want to intrude, but I heard about the hearing. If you need me to say what I saw at the bank that morning, I will." I paused, surprised. "What did you see?" "You were standing in line behind me. The same day they claim you signed. You didn't sign anything. You only cashed a check." Her words were simple. They were also gold. I thanked her, wrote the date in my notebook as soon as I reached home, and added it to the binder. Community witness. The circle was widening. Not because I spoke, but because silence leaves space for truth to echo. That night, when I passed the binder on my table, it no longer looked like a shield. It looked like a mirror. And little by little, others were beginning to see what it reflected. On Monday, the neighborhood forum lit up. I do not post there. I read quietly. A thread started with a photo of her car in the fire lane, hazard lights blinking. The caption asked, "Is this allowed now?" The replies came fast. Some defended her. More did not. "Same car blocked the ramp last week. She paid the caterer in cash at the park pavilion. Where is all this money coming from?" I took screenshots and saved each one to a folder named Community Posts. I printed the thread and clipped the pages together. Words spoken in public have a way of standing still on paper. At the pharmacy, the clerk who has known me for years looked at my prescription bag, then at me. "You all right?" she asked, voice soft. "I will be," I said. She hesitated. "I saw her here yesterday. She was asking the cashier how to notarize a document. The cashier told her we do not do that anymore." The clerk lowered her voice further. "She seemed upset, in a hurry." I thanked her and wrote the date on my receipt as soon as I stepped outside. The small pen line felt steady in my hand. That evening, the HOA sent an email to all residents. The subject read, "Parking Rules Reminder." The body was plain, with 2 photos attached. One image was her car, nose over the curb. The timestamp matched the forum post. I forwarded the email to myself and saved the attachments with the others. Later, a message arrived from a number I recognized as my neighbor 2 doors down. If you need me to confirm she was loading boxes at noon on the day of the transfer, I can. I remember because the moving van blocked my ride. I typed 2 words. Thank you. Then I moved the message into witness logs and wrote his offer on a clean line in my notebook. On the coffee table, the printer warmed. The tray slid out with a soft scrape as I reached for the next screenshot to print. The next morning, I walked to the corner cafe. People's eyes followed me in ways they hadn't before. Not pity, not dismissal, curiosity. At a table by the window, 2 men spoke too loudly to ignore. She says her father gave her everything. But if that's true, why's the bank asking questions? Because it doesn't add up. You don't go from struggling to throwing parties overnight. They laughed, shaking their heads. One of them noticed me as I passed. His smile faltered. He lowered his voice. But the damage was already done. Their words had joined the growing ripple. When I sat with my coffee, a woman from down the block leaned toward me. She spoke gently, like she was offering bread. Don't let them scare you, dear. People are seeing more than you think. She can't hide it all. I nodded, grateful, and made a mental note to write it down later. Every detail mattered, even kindness. That afternoon, I visited the lawyer's office again. His paralegal had organized my binder into a polished case file with dividers and tabs. She slid a new section forward. Community optics. These posts, emails, and witness notes, she explained, don't prove fraud on their own, but they build a frame. They show a pattern. Judges notice when arrogance spills into the street. The lawyer stepped in then, flipping the pages. She's losing control of her image. That is almost as powerful as the receipts. Keep collecting quietly. Do not argue with anyone. Let them talk. Let them watch. I left the office with the binder heavier again, but my steps were lighter. By evening, when I walked through my building's lobby, 2 neighbors who had never spoken to me before both nodded, almost respectful. The silence I had carried for weeks was no longer just mine. It was spreading, and it was on my side now. By midweek, the shift was undeniable. At the supermarket, 2 women spoke near the produce aisle, their voices cutting through the hum of carts. She told me her father signed over the savings. Then why's the fraud unit asking questions? My cousin works at the bank. They froze part of her account. I lingered by the apples, silent, letting their words etch themselves into memory. At home, I printed another set of screenshots from the forum. This time, the thread wasn't about her car or her parties. It was about sympathy for me. Someone had written, he worked overtime for decades. Everyone knows that money wasn't hers. Dozens of comments agreed. The printer spit out each page, warm in my hands. I slipped them into the community optics section, the binder now too thick to close flat. That evening, the phone buzzed with a new text. You're turning people against me. Stop, or I'll make sure you regret it. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. I did not reply. I powered the phone down and set it face down under a stack of receipts. Her threats no longer rattled me. They documented themselves. I sat back, the apartment still. The world outside was beginning to tilt. Not because I shouted, but because I stayed silent. Their eyes were shifting, their whispers sharpening. She had wanted the spotlight. Now it burned. I reached across the table and rested my palm on the binder. The next time we met would not be in a hallway or a kitchen. It would be in court, under lights she could not dim, with eyes she could not charm. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish that morning. I carried the binder in both hands, its weight more solid than any weapon. When I stepped into the courtroom, the gallery buzzed low. people craning their necks as my daughter swept in behind her lawyer. She wore a sharp suit, her hair perfectly set. Her smirk was the same. Her lawyer wasted no time. He rose as soon as the judge entered. Your Honor, as already shown in Exhibit A, my client's father willingly transferred $312,000 into her account. We stand on the strength of his signature and the notarized seal. The judge nodded, flipping to the page. Mr. Last Name, you may now respond. I stood slowly. My lawyer rose beside me, the binder tucked under his arm. He opened it on the table, sliding the first tabbed section forward. The gallery leaned in. Your Honor, my lawyer began, what the opposing side calls strength, we call forgery. What they call official, we call impossible. We will demonstrate through receipts, logs, and official records that my client never signed these transfers. My daughter laughed softly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. He's delusional. The judge lifted a hand. Silence, please. Proceed. The first document went down. The county clerk's letter. My lawyer read the red banner aloud. Commission inactive. No ledger entry. A murmur ran through the gallery. My daughter's smirk twitched. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing on the seal. Inactive, you say? Yes, Your Honor, my lawyer replied. The supposed notary did not even hold a license on the date of the alleged signing. I sat still, hands folded, watching her facade crack under the quiet sound of paper sliding across polished wood. The next tab opened, ready to lay down the device logs like iron nails one by one. My lawyer flipped to the next section. Device logs. He placed the bank's PDF summary on the bench. Your Honor, here is confirmation from the financial institution itself. On the exact days of the disputed transfers, a new device registered to the account. The times of registration match the transfers within minutes. These events occurred while my client was physically clocked in at work. He tapped the highlighted line at the bottom. And the verification codes? They were sent not to his number, but to a secondary number ending in 49. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mr. Last Name, do you recognize this secondary number? I rose slowly. No, Your Honor. I have had the same number for 15 years. It does not end in 49, the gallery whispered. The sound carried like dry leaves. Her lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, this proves nothing. Phones get mixed, carriers, recycle digits. None of this shows my client's involvement. My lawyer placed another page forward, the employment verification letter from my supervisor. Then consider this. On those same dates and times, my client was working overtime at his job, with signatures and digital timestamps to prove it. He could not have registered the device, and he could not have executed the transfer. The judge turned to my daughter. Do you have an explanation? She shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around the armrest. Her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder, but her jaw clenched. Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. He must have forgotten. He gave me the codes once before. He probably just doesn't remember. Gasps rose from the back row. Even her fiancé's face twitched at the stumble. I did not move. I let the silence gather behind me like a tide. My lawyer slid the next section forward. Your Honor, we also submit text messages retrieved from the same week. In them, the daughter asks if he will be at work all day. His reply was yes. Minutes later, the transfers occurred. The judge lifted the page, reading each line. His eyes cut back to her. This does not look like forgetfulness, he said slowly. This looks like opportunity. Her lawyer began to protest, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. I want the handwriting examiner. From the gallery, the examiner stepped forward with her folder. She laid down 2 enlargements, my real signature and Exhibit A. Her finger traced the strokes. "This is natural speed," she said, pointing to my lease. "This is hesitation. Notice the tremor. The pen lifts. This signature was drawn, not written." The gallery fell into silence, so complete I could hear the clock ticking above the bench. I looked at my daughter then, her face pale, her smirk gone, and knew the silence I had carried for weeks was speaking louder now than any word I could offer. The examiner stepped back. Her enlargements lay side by side like two faces lit by the same lamp. My daughter stared at the images and did not blink. Opposing counsel rose fast. "Your Honor, handwriting is subjective. The man is older. Natural tremor could explain the differences." The examiner kept her voice even. "Natural tremor shows across the whole line. Here the tremor appears only on slow curves and it stops. These are hesitation marks. See, the pen lifts inside the loop. The writer paused, touched down again, and traced." He frowned. "You cannot say who wrote it." "I can say my analysis finds it inconsistent with his known hand. I can say the process used is drawing, not writing." The judge nodded once. "Noted." My lawyer moved to the next tab. "Bank witness." A woman in a navy suit approached with a folder. She placed it on the bench. "I am the manager for digital security at the institution. These are our business records." "Proceed," the judge said. She pointed to a table in the packet. On the first transfer date, a new device registered at 11:39 a.m. On the second, at 11:14 a.m., our records show the account holder's primary number did not receive verification codes. A secondary number ending in 49 did. Opposing counsel stepped in. "Your Honor, partial numbers are meaningless." The manager kept her tone flat. "Per subpoena, we matched the secondary number to a subscriber name. The carrier returned a response." My lawyer lifted another sheet. "Filed under seal, Your Honor." The judge read the line in silence, then looked over his glasses at my daughter. "This secondary number is part of a family plan in the fiancé's name, with the daughter listed as an authorized user." A ripple moved through the room. My daughter shifted in her chair, then sat very still. Opposing counsel tried again. "Your Honor, phones are shared. This proves nothing about who typed a code." My lawyer slid the employment letter forward. "It does show who could not have typed it. My client was at work. The device registration event did not occur from his phone." The judge turned to the bank manager. "Location data?" "Only IP blocks, Your Honor. They are not the client's provider. Different carrier, different range." He nodded. "Admitted." My lawyer placed the lobby stills on the rail. "We also have building images from one transfer day. The person entering the elevator at 11:58 is not visible enough to identify, but the timestamp aligns with the new device event." Opposing counsel waved a hand. Blurry pictures, partial numbers, and opinions. My client had consent. My lawyer tapped the text printout. "Consent looks like this?" He read the lines aloud. "Are you at work all day? Yes. Why? Just asking." The judge looked at me. "Sir, did you share your codes with anyone?" "No, Your Honor." He looked at my daughter. "Did you receive codes on a number ending in 49? Her lawyer touched her arm. She swallowed. I do not remember." The judge's voice stayed level. "Do you deny using that number?" Silence. Her eyes fell to the table. The gallery held its breath. My lawyer placed the notary letter back on top. "Your Honor, even if the court were to believe there was consent, the notarization is invalid. The commission was inactive. The ledger has no entry. Business records confirm it. The forgery stands on a broken seal." The judge turned the page again, studying the circle of ink as if it could speak back. He set the letter down and looked at opposing counsel. "Counsel, do you wish to cross the bank, witness further?" He forced a smile. No, Your Honor. Do you wish to call your notary? A pause. Unavailable. The judge's pen tapped the bench once. Of course. My lawyer moved to the final tab for this round. One more short piece, Your Honor. Community witness statement, dated and signed. She places my client behind her in the bank line on the date of the alleged signing. He did not sign documents. He cashed a check and left. Opposing counsel shook his head. Neighbors gossip. The witness is a retired teller, my lawyer said. She knows the difference between a signature card and a deposit slip. The judge's face did not change. He stacked the pages in a neat pile. He adjusted them until the corners aligned. Counsel, he said to my side, your motion? My lawyer stood straighter. We move for a finding of fraud as to Exhibit A, a freeze and clawback of transferred funds, and an order for immediate forensic imaging of the devices connected to number ending in 49. We also request referral to the bank's fraud unit and the district attorney. Opposing counsel sputtered. This is outrageous. My lawyer kept his eyes on the bench. This is paper. The judge leaned back. He looked at the seal on the forged page. He looked at the device table. He looked at me. I stayed quiet. My silence had weight now, not as retreat, but as posture. The judge exhaled slowly. I am prepared to rule on part of this, but I will take brief argument on scope. Opposing counsel rushed in, voice high. Your Honor, if there were mistakes, they were innocent. A daughter helping her father. No one should be punished for a family misunderstanding. My lawyer spoke softly. A misunderstanding does not require an inactive notary. A misunderstanding does not register a new device at the moment funds move. A misunderstanding does not reroute two-factor codes to a different plan. The judge lifted his pen. The gallery went still. The bailiff shifted his stance by the door. I watched the pen hover above the order form, the tip hanging in the space between ink and page. The judge lowered the pen toward the paper, his eyes cutting once more to my daughter as the clerk slid a fresh order pad under his hand. The judge's pen touched down. One firm stroke, then another. The sound of ink moving across the order sheet carried through the silent courtroom. When he finished the first line, he spoke without looking up. Exhibit A is declared invalid. The notarization is void. The alleged transfer is suspended. A murmur ran through the gallery, chairs shifting, whispers cutting sharp. My daughter's face drained. Her lawyer pressed a hand to her arm, but she pulled it away, fingers curling tight against the table edge. The judge continued, his voice steady, each word a weight. Further, this court orders a freeze on funds transferred under the disputed signature. Bank records and carrier logs to be imaged by the fraud unit. Counsel for petitioner will cooperate. Referral is made to the district attorney's office for review of possible forgery and wire fraud. The gavel struck once. The sound was final. Opposing counsel stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is premature. We demand more time. The judge cut him off. Time was yours to prepare. You chose noise. The other side brought proof. My lawyer closed the binder slowly, almost gently, as though tucking the matter to rest. He leaned toward me and whispered, We did not just win the argument. We set the floor for prosecution. I nodded once. I did not speak. My silence had already spoken enough. As the courtroom emptied, people's eyes moved between me and my daughter. Some shook their heads. Others whispered openly. Her fiancé walked quickly ahead, jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. She followed, slower, shoulders bent. The smirk was gone. I stood, smoothed the front of my jacket, and carried the binder out under my arm. It was lighter now, not because it held fewer pages, but because it no longer carried humiliation. Outside, the courthouse steps glared in the noon sun. Reporters lingered at the bottom, their cameras turning as we passed. My lawyer raised a hand to wave them off. I kept my eyes forward. The silence I carried with me down those steps was not the silence of defeat anymore. It was the silence of something finished, something irreversible. When I reached the street, my phone buzzed in my pocket. One new message waited, the screen lighting up against my palm. I did not read it yet. I only kept walking, binder firm under my arm, each step echoing like the final note of a long, bitter song. By week's end, the collapse had begun. The bank sent formal notice. Accounts frozen pending fraud review. Creditors called her phone, not mine. Her fiancé's car disappeared from their driveway overnight, hauled away by a tow truck under floodlights. Neighbors watched, word spreading fast. Where there had once been admiration, her new jewelry, her grand parties, there was now only curiosity and disdain. On the neighborhood forum, threads multiplied. "Guess who the fraud unit visited today?" one post read. The comments rolled in, some mocking, some harsh, all circling the same truth. She had built her image on lies. I stayed quiet. I went to work. I came home. I watered my plants. I let silence keep doing the work it had always done. The first call came late at night. I didn't answer. The second came early morning. I let it ring. On the third, I picked up. Her voice cracked through the receiver. "Dad, please, you don't understand what they're doing to me. They're freezing everything. I can't pay rent. I can't—" Her breath hitched. "I need you to fix this. Just say you signed, please." I sat at my table, binder closed in front of me, my hand resting on the cover. I let her words spill, each one heavier than the last. When she paused, waiting, I spoke. My voice was calm. "The truth is already speaking. I don't need to." Silence filled the line. A soft sob broke it, then the click of disconnection. I set the phone face down on the table, the hum of the refrigerator louder than her fading voice. The next day, my lawyer forwarded a notice from the bank's fraud team. They would image the devices linked to the secondary number. They would pull logins, text backups, and IP routes. The language was dry and heavy. It read like a door closing. By noon, new threads appeared on the forum. Photos of boxes on her porch. A caption, "Moving out already?" The comments were not kind. I did not join. I saved each image and filed them in Community Optics without a word. In the afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened, her fiancé stood in the hallway, face tight, hands buried in his pockets. He did not smile. "This is your fault," he said. "You could have kept this private. Now the bank is in our phones. My work called. They want explanations." I kept the door half closed. "You should give them the truth." He took a step closer. "You think this makes you a hero? You will end up alone. She will never forgive you." I let the sentence sit. Then I said, "I did not take anything from her." He blew out a short breath, shook his head, and left without another word. His footsteps echoed down the stairs, hard and fast. I watched the spot where he had stood until the silence settled again. That evening, an email from the district attorney's office arrived. Subject: Intake appointment. The message asked for a brief meeting to review the judge's referral. There was no heat in the words, only process. I confirmed a time. Then I printed the email and slid it behind the court orders tab. Later, my ex-wife called. I let it ring twice before I answered. Her voice was thin. "She is a wreck. People are whispering. Can you ease this? Just tell the bank it was a family matter." "It was not a family matter," I said. "It was fraud." A long pause scratched against the line. "You have no mercy left." I looked at the binder on the table. "Mercy does not erase signatures I did not write." She sighed, low and tired, then hung up. I placed the phone beside the binder and returned to my list for the morning. At night, I took a slow walk around the block. Front porches glowed. Television light flickered in windows. Ordinary life moved forward. When I came back up the stairs, a white paper lay at my door. It was a past due notice from a luxury furniture store I had never set foot in. Her name sat on the account. My address had been listed as a contact without my consent. I photographed the notice and slid it into creditors. Then I wrote 2 lines in my notebook. Unauthorized contact listing. Notice received. Small lines. Clear lines. Enough. The phone buzzed again near midnight. A message this time. Please, I am scared. I read the words twice. I pictured the courtroom, the seal, the pen lifts, the code rerouted to a number that was not mine. I did not reply. I set the phone face down and listened to the hum of the fridge. In the quiet, I opened the binder and placed the district attorney email on top, the paper's edge aligned with the cover, ready for the morning when the next door would open. The district attorney's office was stark and quiet, its walls lined with framed case outcomes. A young investigator led me into a small room with a table, a recorder, and 2 glasses of water. My binder sat in front of me, its edges worn from use. The investigator pressed a button. For the record, state your name. I did, my voice even. He flipped through the binder slowly, stopping at the notary letter, the device logs, the employment records. You built this yourself? Yes, I kept everything. Paper remembers what people forget. He nodded, almost impressed. You've done half our job already. We'll be subpoenaing her devices and bank accounts. The phone line ending in 49 will be priority. The recorder caught every word. Each one felt like a nail sealing a door she could no longer open. When the session ended, he slid the binder back across the table. Keep it close. This will move quickly. Outside, the air was crisp. As I walked past the courthouse, 2 neighbors I barely knew called out from the steps. One lifted a hand. We're with you. Don't let them spin it. I nodded once, not slowing my stride. That evening, my daughter's number called again. I let it ring. Seconds later, a voicemail arrived. Her voice shook. Dad, please. I didn't think it would go this far. They're saying I could lose everything. Just tell them you signed, please. I'm begging. I sat at my table, listening in silence. I did not delete it. I saved it. I burned it to a disk and labeled it voicemail evidence. Later that night, the forum lit with photos of movers carrying furniture out of her apartment. The caption read, "Guess the party's over." Comments stacked below, sharp and unsympathetic. I printed them, slid them into Community Optics, and closed the binder. The apartment hummed with quiet as I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I did not feel the weight of defense. I felt the distance of someone watching a storm break far away, safe behind walls built from proof. By the end of the month, the collapse was complete. The fraud unit confirmed the transfers as unauthorized, the district attorney prepared charges, and the bank notified me that restitution proceedings would begin once assets were traced. Word spread faster than paper. Neighbors who once smiled politely now shook their heads when her name came up. At the cafe, I overheard one line repeated again and again. She stole from her own father. The words no longer carried shock, only certainty. One evening, as I returned from work, I found her waiting at my door. Her eyes were swollen, makeup streaked. She stood without the armor of jewelry or expensive clothes, just a plain jacket hanging loose. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm sorry." "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted security. I thought you'd understand." I looked at her for a long moment. My hands stayed at my sides. My voice stayed calm. You forged my name, you stole my years. That is not security. Tears slid down her cheeks. If you don't help me, they'll take everything. I shook my head slowly. They are not taking it. You already lost it when you lied. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. The silence between us stretched wider than any courtroom. Finally, she lowered her head, turned, and walked down the stairs. Her footsteps echoed until they were gone. I closed my door, locked it, and sat at the table. The binder lay before me, heavy but quiet. It no longer felt like a shield or a weapon. It felt like closure. That night, when the phone buzzed again, I didn't check it. I let the silence answer for me. The collapse was hers now, not mine. Weeks turned into months, and the storm passed into memory. The district attorney filed charges, the bank completed its clawback, and what had been taken began to return piece by piece. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply filed each new letter in the binder, its pages now a complete story told in paper and silence. Neighbors still whispered, but now it was with nods in my direction, small gestures of respect. At the cafe, people no longer lowered their voices when I walked by. Some even stopped to say, "Good for you," or "I'm glad you stood your ground." I answered with a polite smile and kept walking. At work, my supervisor clapped me on the shoulder one evening. "You're steadier than most of us could ever be," he said. I only nodded. Steadiness had not felt like a choice. It had been survival. Home was quieter than before, but it no longer felt empty. The silence that once pressed down now lifted me. I watered my plants, read in the evenings, and took long walks around the block. The city looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. The binder still sat on the table, but I no longer opened it nightly. It rested there like a closed chapter, heavy but calm, a reminder of what silence and proof could do. One evening, as I poured tea and sat by the window, I realized I was no longer waiting for the next knock, the next threat, the next courtroom. I was simply living, and that was enough. Spring arrived quietly. The trees outside my window bloomed, soft green returning to branches that had been bare during the worst of it. I found myself sitting at the table less, and at the park more. The binder stayed on its shelf, unopened, like an old photograph album you no longer need to leaf through to remember. Letters still came, court updates, bank statements confirming balance restorations. Each one I filed neatly, but with less urgency. They were no longer battles. They were echoes. One Saturday morning, I walked past the farmer's market and heard two neighbors talking. "He never raised his voice once," one said. "And he still won," the other replied. Their words stayed with me. Winning didn't feel like triumph. It felt like stillness, like a river that had finally returned to its course after being dammed. My daughter had not called in weeks. No messages, no knocks at my door. The silence from her side was different. It was absence, not discipline. I did not chase it. I did not fill it. I let it be. In the evenings, I wrote small notes in a plain journal, not evidence this time, just thoughts. One line I returned to often. "Peace is louder than proof once justice is done." I looked at that line one night, the ink still drying on the page, and realized it was the truth I had waited for all along. I closed the journal and placed it beside the binder. One held the war, the other the calm that followed. Both belonged to me, but only one still needed to be opened. Summer carried a different kind of silence, not the heavy kind that once pressed on my chest, but the easy silence of mornings with open windows and the sound of birds settling on the railing. I walked to the park most evenings, watching families gather, children running, dogs pulling at their leashes. Nobody looked at me with pity anymore. Some nodded in quiet respect. Some even stopped to chat. I never told them details. I didn't need to. The papers had already spoken where it mattered. One afternoon, as I returned home with groceries, the building manager stopped me in the lobby. He tapped the side of his clipboard. "Glad you saw it through," he said simply. "Not everyone has the patience." Patience. That word had followed me like a shadow, once mocked, now valued. I smiled and thanked him. At home, I placed the groceries down and noticed the binder on its shelf. Dust had begun to gather on its spine. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty leaving it there. Its job was finished. I poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and let the evening light stretch across the floor. No buzzing phone, no knocking at the door. Just quiet. I thought then of the courtroom, of her smirk when she held up that forged page, and of the silence I had chosen in response. Silence had carried me all the way here, to this room, to this peace. And I understood finally, it was not weakness, it was strength dressed in stillness. Autumn came, and with it, closure. The district attorney's office sent a final notice. The case would proceed without me needing to appear again. Restitution was already in motion. My role was complete. I held the letter in my hands for a long moment before sliding it into the binder. Then, after weeks of hesitation, I closed the cover and placed the binder inside the steel box. The key turned with a soft click, the sound final but not heavy. Life filled with smaller rhythms, morning walks, evening tea, reading by the window as leaves turned gold. I no longer lived under the weight of her choices. Neighbors still spoke in hushed tones when her name surfaced, but now they looked at me differently. Not as a victim, not as a man humiliated in court, but as someone who had endured and emerged intact. Respect lived in their silence. One night, as I wrote in my plain journal, I paused and set the pen down. I looked at the page and whispered aloud, "Peace is better than family who sell you out." The words felt steady, like a stone placed in the center of calm water. I closed the journal, set it beside the steel box, and turned off the lamp. The room fell quiet, not with emptiness, but with dignity. And in that quiet, I finally understood. The sharpest answer I ever gave was silence, and it had carried me all the way to freedom. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing.